What if a company could promise not to spy on you and still hand your movements to federal agents, perfectly legally, without lying once? That's not a paradox. That's Tuesday. Google told millions of users their sensitive location data was protected. Then the government asked, and the data moved anyway. Not because Google is evil. Because of something far more structural and far harder to fix. In 2023, facing public pressure after the Dobbs decision, Google announced a landmark change. It would automatically delete location history for visits to sensitive places, abortion clinics, domestic violence shelters, addiction treatment centers, immigration offices. The press release was warm and reassuring. Privacy advocates called it progress. Users exhaled. What nobody asked out loud was, what about the data that already existed? ICE Immigration and Customs Enforcement used a legal instrument called a geofence warrant to obtain Google location data covering a specific area and time window. This doesn't target a named suspect. It sweeps up everyone whose phone passed through that zone. You. The delivery driver. The person who took a wrong turn. All of their location histories handed over because a court said Google had to. Here's the thing about legal data demands. They don't care about privacy promises. A promise is a corporate document. A warrant is a legal instrument backed by the coercive power of the state. When those two things meet, one of them wins, and it isn't the press release. Google can want to protect your data genuinely, sincerely, and still be legally compelled to produce it. The promise was never the lock. It was the label on the lock. Think of your location data as letters you've mailed, except you never sealed the envelopes, and you handed them to a company that stores them in a warehouse where they've promised not to let anyone in without good reason. Now imagine good reason is defined not by you, not by the company, but by a judge you'll never meet, in a proceeding you won't know about, for a list of names that might not even include yours. Geofence warrants are particularly blunt instruments. They don't target people, they target coordinates. Draw a circle on a map, pick a time range, and everyone inside becomes a data point to be sorted. Some courts have started ruling them unconstitutional. But the legal landscape is still being written, and your location history doesn't wait for jurisprudence to catch up. The deeper issue isn't that Google broke a promise. It's that the architecture of surveillance capitalism makes these promises structurally fragile from the start. When your business model requires storing vast behavioral data, you are simultaneously building an asset that governments will always find reasons to access. Privacy policies are written by lawyers for regulators. Warrants are written by prosecutors for judges. Those are very different audiences with very different leverage. So what actually protects you? Not promises, those are conditional. Not goodwill, that's contingent. The only durable protection is data that doesn't exist. If it isn't stored, it can't be subpoenaed. The companies that will prove trustworthy long-term aren't the ones with the best privacy marketing, they're the ones that have genuinely minimized what they collect. Everyone else is just holding your letters in an unlocked warehouse, hoping no one comes to ask. Strip it down and the structure is simple. A company collected data because that's the business, issued a privacy promise because that's the marketing, and then complied with a legal demand because that's the law. None of those three things contradict each other. That's the point. Geofence warrants don't need a name, they need a coordinate. Privacy policies don't need to be lies, they just need to be written by a different department than the one that handles subpoenas. And users don't need to be deceived, they just need to believe the label is the same as the lock. The entire architecture works exactly as designed. The question is whose design you think it is. What strikes us isn't that the government asked for the data, that's what governments do. What strikes us is how little of this surprised anyone once the story broke. There was outrage, briefly, and then a kind of tired shrug. And we think that shrug is doing a lot of work. It's absorbing something that probably shouldn't be absorbed, that the infrastructure we use to navigate our lives is also, by design, a detailed record of them, accessible to state power under conditions we never negotiated and will rarely hear about. We're not saying that's fixable easily. We're saying it's worth sitting with the discomfort instead of letting the shrug do its job. So here's the question we keep coming back to: if the only real protection is data that doesn't exist, What does it mean that we've collectively built a world where almost everything does?